Fragments of Silicon, your favorite indie podcast.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. Joining me, as always, is the regular crew. Apologies for the late start. We have a more complicated than usual game setup going for this week, and we were just taking some extra time to make sure it all worked. And it all does. So, anyway, let's get to the news. Teddy, why don't you start us off this week?
Well, some decent news. I found the paperwork for my insurance about the exemption that they pay for my physical therapy, so I just need to bring that to my doctor's office on Monday, and they can get that handled. So they don't need to pay like $400.
That's good. That's good.
And as far as game stuff, I haven't really done a whole lot this week. Mostly because I have a few games on my Christmas list, so kind of waiting to see if those are coming or whatnot. And I guess that's really all from me. Quiet week this week.
All right. Well, Alex?
My Pokemoning has continued, unsurprisingly. Shovel Knight also finally came out, and I finally got those amiibos that I bought, over a year ago, I think. So that's a thing. I haven't actually gotten around to playing King of Cards yet, but it sounds interesting, so...
Well, I mean, it's on the review queue, so...
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm going to. I just haven't yet.
I know.
The weather has been various kinds of mostly not that pleasant. And, but not too bad, thankfully. And I have holiday vacation time coming up, which is good, because I also need to do some other stuff in addition to finishing my Christmas shopping. I forget if I mentioned this on the show before, but I went to the dentist to get some filling work done, and before they gave me the local anesthetic, they took my blood pressure and determined it was too high for them to do that, although that was partially because they did a bad job and because I was a little bit stressed out because when I was a kid, I got my arm stuck in one of those stupid grocery store pressure testing cuffs.
Fun.
So I have a little bit of trauma from that. So anyway, I need to get an actual primary care physician to see if we can do something about the, medicine for that. And that's about all I got.
All right, Twilight?
Well, the weather's been kind of soggy, so that's a kind of understatement, though. Anyway, been doing some Christmas shopping. It's been going decently well. Found a few things for my parents. Let's see now. What else? Work's been busy. With it being holiday season, of course. And in terms of gaming, I haven't really done much in terms of playing games for this during this week. However, I'm thrilled about the news of Resident Evil 3 Remake coming out this April, and that's about it.
All right. Guess it's my go. Well, let me see. Seems like it's the season of replacing stuff, since just had to get a new floor lamp.
Fun.
I'm like, the old one was its wooden pole was starting to split, so it was starting to lean.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's like the new one's holding up fairly well. It's only like $15. much less drastic than replacing a laptop, let's say. Like, in terms of gaming, let's see. I already wrapped up what I have to say for the reviews this week, so I've been playing Chrono Trigger. I had an urge to play Chrono Trigger.
You scraping something, Adam?
No.
There's some scrapey noises.
Weird. Like, let's see. MSP continues to be a thing. Like I said, not sure how long that's going to be a thing. I know Mac and Keith are planning on it being a long-term thing, but Mac's projects, and sometimes they don't last as long as they are expected to. At least they fixed their audio quality. Seriously. Anyway, so that'll about do it for the news. So, merrily, we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week is Kevin Bikhazi of Atomic Lollipop.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very good. Thank you.
That's good to hear. That's very good to hear. Right. So, how we like to get started? We like to ask the person behind the games, behind the studio and whatnot, what got them interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
That's a very, very good question. I think my first experience where I kind of got into video games, the first time I remember playing it was when I got a Nintendo Entertainment System in probably 1987 for Christmas. And my parents had bought a ton of games. They bought us, like, my sister and I, like, little TVs. And yeah, we just started. I think the first game I played was like Top Gun at that time. I was really into like fighter planes and that kind of stuff as a kid. So I put that on, just pressed a bunch of buttons, and then I think we went to like Mike Tyson's Punch Out from there. Again, just kind of like I remember just pressing buttons and not really knowing what I was doing. And then I played some Zelda, I think, something like the original Zelda. And I don't know, like I think from that moment, I was never really like, I never considered myself to be like a massive gamer, but I always really enjoyed video games and creativity and just art and that's kind of like, and then and that was like my first kind of experience with video games where I got my first console. And then and then I got a PC like in like probably 1991, 1992, and I got Comanche Overkill was like the first game I had for that, which was this kind of like voxel based helicopter game that was like way ahead of its time in terms of graphics. And I went from like a Nintendo into that, and it was interesting because like going into the PC, it's just so much, I don't know, like at that time it was just so much different. It was just a lot, it was just a lot more complex, a lot more realistic. There's a lot more variety, a lot more intensity in the game. So I like started playing like Wolfenstein and then Quake and then Doom. I was also always into flight simulators. So back in those days in the 80s and 90s, flight sims were like really big. I don't know if you guys remember that at all.
I remember them being on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Engineers love flight sims for some reason. So in those days, engineers were the people who dominated really like computer gaming.
Right.
And so, of course, the games were built for them, and they really like complex technical games, which was good for me because I loved, flying, and I loved, and I was a kid, so it allowed me to like fly. So I was playing a lot of these like flight sims, and those were available on the PC. And that's kind of like how I got into video games, and I was always kind of a creative person in terms of like but I liked art and engineering both at the same time, and science. So that's kind of how I got into games, and I pretty much, I got like every console, Super Nintendo, Genesis, but of course I was playing a lot more PC as well. just played as many games as I could. Even it's funny, like even though I was playing all these games, I never really considered myself like a big gamer. I think because I never felt I was really like good at playing video games. I was never like the best player. But I still loved games. I loved the fantasy behind them, and that's how I got into video games, I would say.
Uh-huh. And, well, branching off on that, at what point did you decide that you could, make a living making the video games?
Yeah, I never really thought even to this day, I don't really consider it that I could or will make a living at it. I would like to make a living at it. But I would say 3 years ago is when I started thinking about creating a company and potentially doing that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so just 3 years that I've really been making video games on a commercial level, I would say.
So this is a side job of yours.
Yeah, this is a side job, which I would like to become my primary job. I currently run a software development company. I own the company, and I run that. And we build websites, web apps, and mobile apps for people.
And what was the big light bulb that made you decide that you wanted to make a video game?
So I was always interested, from even being a kid, I was always interested in making, or like how they were made. I was actually really interested in, it was always fascinating to me, even from, being 7, 6, 7, 8 years old. I was fascinated about how are these things made? And it's funny, I had maybe 5 or 6 failed attempts along the way to start making video games. And then I had gained enough experience in programming, and I had taken, another shot at it at one point about 3 years ago, and it stuck. I was actually able to produce and develop and release my first video game called Net Blast. And like I said, it was probably the 6th or 7th try at making a video game, getting into it, but this time it worked. The reason it worked specifically is, yes, I had more experience, but I also decided to use a YouTube video series to learn, what I needed to learn. And I think that was critical because you can't really fail, right? It's so long as you do all the videos, and you copy exactly what they're doing, you will learn and you will complete something, right? At the end of that series. It's usually 25 to 35 videos that you'll go through in a series. And it gave me enough momentum to keep going on my own. And I think that is the critical thing. If you want to start building video games, best thing to do, and it's free, is you just start on a YouTube video series. Probably, getting, download Unity, it's free, and just go grab almost any video series that you think might be interesting, that is the type of game you want to build. And that should, in my opinion, give you enough experience to just keep going. So I think that's what made the difference this last time was getting on, like I said, it's probably because I did have more programming experience, and then also having this kind of structured path of how to build a video game.
So was it a smooth transition?
Very smooth, yeah. Once I had done that, I felt I had enough knowledge and, using Google and Stack Overflow and YouTube and, all the internet resources, I was able to learn, and books. I read a lot of books. And it was enough for me to keep going on my own.
Right. And so your first, I suppose, commercial product is this game Power.
I had one before this that was free to play, but also had some commercial elements. It had some, some cosmetics you could buy in it. So that was the first one, was called Net Blast, which was Mario Brothers, but online multiplayer, and you can shoot each other basically. In a 2D 8-bit format. Very fun game. We made a bunch of mistakes because it was our first game, and we worked on it for like 2.5 years. So I kind of got tired of it and wanted to move into something else. And then so Power's really our second commercial attempt, where I feel like we did everything right with Power, or at least we fixed all the problems that we had with NetBlast, and we really, tried to do it right with Power. Like we really wanted to, and still do want to achieve a lot of success with it.
Well, I suppose the question that beckons is, what went wrong with Blaster or NetBlast, and what was rectified with Power?
So the couple things that were wrong with NetBlast, one is it had no hooks, what I call hooks, which are things that make it like cool and unique. And it doesn't matter how good a game is, like it needs to be remarkable in some way. It needs to have stuff that makes it that makes it stand out from the other games in the market, and it needs to have things that make it, that make people want to talk about it and tell other people about it, and that make it look interesting. So that was something. Also, although NetBlast was a lot of fun, it didn't have anything remarkable about it, And the second thing was some of the gameplay mechanics in Power. Like we had like an RPG like progression system, and we found that RPG progression systems are great for single player where you're kicking the enemies behind, but when you have users in a multiplayer environment and some of them are like higher level than others, and they have more abilities or like higher level weapons and that kind of stuff, it creates a chasm in skill level that's like basically perceived as being unfair.
Welcome to the MMO PvP problem.
That's the MMO PvP problem. So like exactly, and so we encountered that unbeknownst to us, and it wasn't something we could just like remove out of the game. We didn't really want to, and I kind of liked it actually, because I like these big challenges. I actually like playing players that have like a skill advantage, and we tried to balance it by like if you killed a higher level player, you would get more coin, and then you could use that coin, what we called our coin, it's like an in-game currency, to level up your player faster, basically, because you got more of it when you killed a higher level player. But people didn't like that. So I think it was those two things in NetBlast. It was the lack of hooks, and it was this progression, this kind of like integrated progression system that didn't really work well in a multiplayer environment. So with Power, we rectified both of those right away. Like we came up with about 5 or 6 hooks on Power that we thought were cool, which was the procedural terrain, so every level is different every game, the destructible environment where you can like blow holes through mountains, the fast like movement, and like the skiing and the jetpacking and going like 100 miles an hour in the game. And I'm trying to think what else. There was like a couple other like hooks that we had as well, that we thought were like just things that were cool and unique that would make it really interesting. But those are the main ones, like the procedural terrain, destructible terrain, and like the fast movement and like high jumps and all of that. And then the other thing we did is we didn't put the progression system in. That's why you have loot cubes throughout the level. So like everybody kind of starts the same, and during the gameplay you progress. You get your boosts, you get your weapons, you power up like during the gameplay.
Now, with NetBlast, you mentioned that was like a 2D platformer, 8-bit style kind of game, and this is a fully on 3D FPS. Was it a challenge, making that leap into 3D gaming, and much more complicated everything, really?
It to be honest with you, it wasn't that bad. I had a lot of experience with 3D beforehand in my engineering job, so I understood XYZ, and we also, we were using Unreal Engine, so that makes things a lot easier. There's a lot of stuff you don't have to deal with because you're using that with 3D. I mean, it's by nature 3D. My artist, had is like, we did utilize some pieces of the Unreal Marketplace. Like, we purchased the voxel technology from there. We purchased the trees that you're seeing as well.
Mhm.
So some of the assets, but all of it was modified, obviously, and customized to our game. But yeah, the weapon models and the character models were built by my artist. However, they are low poly, so that makes it easier, right? They're not meant to look like highly, extremely realistic, so that made it a little bit easier. And then they're also everything is just polygons. Like there's no actual textures in the game. Everything just has what are called materials applied to them, but there's no textures. So that saved a lot of time. So the low poly and the textures, or lack of textures saved us, some time. And then also the procedural environments and the marketplace also saved us time. So with that, it was very achievable, even though we hadn't done it before.
Okay. And how many people are working on the game currently?
Just 2 people, just myself doing all the programming and my artist doing, all the models and modeling.
Oh.
And, artwork like HUD icons and stuff like that.
And how long have you been working on Power?
Not that long. We started March 18th of 2019. So like 9 months roughly, a little less than 9, maybe 8 months now.
I gotta say, what you got here is pretty impressive for the amount of people working on it, and the scale and scope of the game.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Like it's just we've talked to developers who've been working on games that on the surface don't look as as complicated or whatever, but took 3, 4, even like 7 years because of one factor or another. Like,
yeah,
it's like making games is usually an intensively long process.
Yes, that is true. I come from a startup background, building startups for people. So in that industry, it's all about like, launch fast and, and iterate quickly. So that was kind of our motto on this, is to, that's why we utilized Unreal Engine. We wanted to get that technology in there, so it gave us a head start. And we utilized some assets from the store to give us a head start. We kept it low poly,
Yeah.
Didn't use any textures. So yeah, there were some things, and then we also have this mentality of, in fact, we launched the game, into alpha testing in August. So, and that's the other kind of concept in startups, is you should launch something like, if you're not embarrassed when you launch your game to the, at least to the private sector of like alpha testers, like then you've launched too late. So because you need to start getting feedback as quickly as possible. It's critical so that you can actually figure out what you're supposed to be building. And so yeah, so we were, I don't know how long that is, so it's like March, April, July, within 4 to 5 months we were already in, it had already been kind of released privately into alpha testing. And I think all games should be that way. That's my opinion. Like you should never spend more than a year before actually getting it out into testing, in my opinion. And then if you can, I would say you should do 4 to 5 months. And your entire plan should be built around that. And what you do is you just if you're like, well, I can't do it, then whatever that is that's causing you to not be able to launch, you get rid of it. You just say, okay, we're not going to do that then. Like you have to remove stuff so you can do that. With that said, NetBlast wasn't really that way. We did spend like a couple years, maybe a year and a half before we got it out, which was too long. But that's my theory, that at least that's my philosophy, and that's kind of what we did with this. And that's why, because we were the whole time knowing and thinking like we got to get this out quick, So it was very intentional.
Right. I guess one thing that should be clarified, as you mentioned this pre-show, is that this game is actually technically in early access. It's just something got fudged along the way.
Yeah, missed something along. I could have sworn it might have just been in a dream or something that I clicked in Steam. This thing's supposed to be early access, but apparently I missed that. I don't know how I did it, but yeah, when we launched, we realized it wasn't early access. So yes, but it is very much an early access game, although it's not released under early access. It is an early access game.
Right. So I suppose the question is, what is the actual state of the game then? Like, how long are you in terms of development, in terms of adding content, and all that sort of thing?
State of the game right now is excellent. The 2 game modes that are there are, they're not complete, especially Capture the Flag, but they're very fun and playable, and they provide many hours of entertainment. Because we launched and because of our iteration rate, because we launched back in or started getting the alpha testing back in August, we've completed probably thousands of feedback cards now. So what you're playing right now today is it's not, I wouldn't say it's, I would say it is it's not, I want to say highly polished, but at the same time, I know it's going to get better and there's a lot more to still do. But it's, like I said, it's gone through a lot of iteration cycles and it's had a lot of feedback applied. And it's been balanced. It's highly balanced right now. The weapons and the movement and the size of the levels, the number of players, the damage, everything is the net code, the graphics, the FPS, everything's highly optimized, highly balanced. But with that said, we love the platform. We love all the aspects about it. We're planning to add a lot more game mode, team deathmatch, Juggernaut, Capture the Fortress. We're adding a PvE game mode, player versus environment game mode with AI. We're working on the first AI right now. I'm just learning Unreal Engine AI at the moment, and I'm doing an AI defense turret right now for the CTF mode. We're going to be adding in an inside level that does not use the terrain, but that is like a large inside arena, kind of like Quake 2 style. But that still has this the skiing and the jetpacking and the fast movement and the same weapons, but all in an internal arena that's not procedural, and you can play any game mode with that. And we're gonna launch a moddable version of the game as well. So I foresee another 2 or 3 years of development on the game in terms of just adding new game modes, supporting the modders, adding new weapons, adding new technologies. We listen to the community a lot, so just kind of anything that they want to do. So yeah, I would say that's kind of where we're at with it. Although it's early access, it's highly valuable to them, and there's a lot more to go, a lot more stuff we want to do with it because we just like the platform. We like the fact that we're not trying to be the most realistic looking game. I think that really helped us a lot. It freed us up to focus more on the gameplay, and it also makes the game more timeless, and we're not competing to be hey, we're the most realistic looking game and having to optimize for that. So yeah.
Petty?
Hmm?
Oh, sorry. I thought someone was asking a question. Anyway, the question along the lines of the aesthetic is there any sort of lore? Is there any sort of story? Who are these people that you are playing? Why are they shooting each other? That kind of thing.
Yeah, we had a story at one point. We were going to integrate that, but there is not currently an official story or lore yet. There really should be, technically, it's usually an important part of a game to have that, especially for it to be successful. It's generally considered, one of the components needed. Unfortunately, We do not have that yet. Luckily, it is a multiplayer game, so it's not as necessary if it were like a kind of like a single player adventure type game.
I mean, works for Overwatch, right?
What was that?
I mean, works for Overwatch, right?
Yeah, I think a lot.
Okay, technically
like,
they have a story, but they're not telling you any of it.
I mean, like, almost no multiplayer games really have a story. Like Counter-Strike Source, there's no story that I know of. Battlefield, there's really no story that I know of, like in the multiplayer mode. Overwatch.
I suppose we should clarify. Even the most basic, like online multiplayer shooters may not have a story, but they have a framing device. Like Counter-Strike, it's mercs versus counter-terrorists,
That is
for example.
true. That is true.
So,
That is true.
It's like, it's more a question of who are the sides and why are they fighting kind of deal.
Totally.
Yeah.
We did have a story at one point. We just haven't really like officially integrated it yet.
Right. Anyway, as you said,
it was basically like that. There was like these two sides, kind of like the evil side and like the good side. I think we were like one of them was called the GDC, the Global Defense Coalition, and the other one was called like the Zorg or something. And we just don't have models for that yet.
right.
But and then I'm trying to remember like why they were fighting. Oh, like over resources, I think it was. Like the Zorg were like attacking the planet, and then the Global Defense Coalition or GDC came together to protect these resources. As you're digging in the islands, these artifacts, these health and shield artifacts, are essentially like these resources that they're trying to capture from your planet.
Right.
So yeah, we do have it, but we just haven't like fully integrated it. We could probably we would definitely need models for the Zorg, and like I think the GDC models would be the ones that we already currently have, the Global Defense Coalition models, but we would like other humanoid type models for everything. So yeah, we're kind of like reutilizing or reusing the same models right now with different colors at this point.
Makes sense. As you said, this is an online multiplayer shooter, so such things are not high on the priority list.
Correct.
Anyway, moving to like more mechanical matters. How many people can play in a death match or capture the flag currently, and what sort of number are you aiming for in terms of max amount of players?
Good question. And so that's actually decided for us in a way, based on other factors that are interesting. So for example, the level size. So the levels take, as they currently are, as you've seen, 30 seconds to a minute to load. And for that given size level that takes that long to load, we found 8 players worked really well, where it didn't get too chaotic. But that also works really well because the game is peer-to-peer. It doesn't have any dedicated servers, so it's better to keep it at like 8 players because it just reduces the load on the server, on the host computer that's like hosting the game. So for the map size and for the peer-to-peer aspect, we're just keeping it at 8 players right now, which we found works well. Like you could have good, fun, team games and player versus player games with just 8 players. And yeah, we're not really trying to compete with, with like Fortnite with like 100 players. Although we could, and we do have the networking ability to do that. But again, like our level sizes don't really accommodate 100 players, and it would take way too long to generate a lot. And then furthermore, it would be hard for, a host to like process 100 players for, everybody to play on. So, because like every player you add, the host actually has to be constantly seeing and processing everything at the same time. So the host computer doesn't like have any kind of like net culling or anything like that. So it's highly intensive but it can be optimized and it can probably be done. But that's kind of what we're targeting right now. It's just 8. We might go to like 16 players at some point. But for now, we're trying to keep it around 8, just to keep the netcode down to accommodate the level size and that kind of stuff.
Now, you mentioned earlier before that you're making your first forays into AI. Now, up to playable bots.
Sure.
Would that still require a multiplayer component, or like could you be one person against bots?
No, you can be. That's what we plan, is that our PvE mode, or player versus environment mode, we want to make it where you can just go one player, single player against the environment, or you can team up and go against it.
Right.
So we plan for the AI in that mode to allow for single player play.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I would love to be able to do that, and just have something like a either like a capture the fortress, where there's like a fortress in the middle of the level, and then it's just whoever can capture it fastest. It's not that. It's more of like people just they're probably gonna be sharing that information online, in the community, on forums and stuff, like, or recording a video like, here I am capturing it, in like 2 minutes and 33 seconds or something, right? And that's officially the world record, and everybody can see it because they watched the video of it happen. So maybe something like that. See, like, who can capture the fortress fastest, kind of thing.
Okay. And let me see here. Now, in terms of like computer platforms, is this game Windows only, or are there Mac and Linux builds as well?
So right now it's Windows only. It is. We did try to do a Linux build recently, although we found that was going to be a lot more difficult. And then, considering that they're such a low percentage of the market, really, they're actually only about 0.8% of Steam. So like less than 1% of Steam is on Linux. We did try though, and it is possible, but it's like it's a lot more work than we expected. So we're not really planning, and we're probably just going to keep it Steam and Windows for now. I think some like low-hanging fruit would be to launch it like on Xbox, Microsoft, because it is 64-bit. It is using DirectX currently. It can use OpenGL, but we haven't tested it with OpenGL. But yeah, it's already 64-bit, already DirectX. It's on Unreal. There's really no reason we can't port it to. It already, it already supports, Xbox One gamepad controller. You know what I mean? It's like not that far away from being able to be put onto like an Xbox.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, at least in terms of the technicals.
Yeah, I think there's some interface work that needs to be done. That they, that we'd have to go through their documentation. We'd have to partner up with, with their Xbox, development kit, essentially, and get that and go through that process. But we're not really planning. I think for now, we're just going to keep it Windows. The Windows is 95% of Steam. So we're going to try to get it big there. And then, if it takes, and we're going to optimize it there, we're going to like add to it there. And then if there's interest at some point, if the game gets big, then yeah, we'll go ahead and port it to probably Xbox. I would think might be the easiest, and then maybe PlayStation. I mean, that's where I would like to put it. Not so much Linux and Mac. I don't think the market's really there for it. It's not. I mean, if it was easy, we would do it. I think Linux, even though it's a low percentage of the market, I'm interested in that just because I feel like I just like their ethos, really, and like, they're just, and I think the people that use Linux are highly technical people, and I think this game is appealing to highly technical people. So I would like to do. That's why I did try to do the Linux build. I spent about 2 days on it, because I wanted to give that community something, because I know they're not really. They're kind of ignored because they're not a big percentage of the market, because it's not all about market to me. I want just people to enjoy the game. So, but I feel like Mac, for me, it's like, I just don't know anybody that has a Mac that games on their Mac. But then again, I don't know. I don't know that many people, but like, I just feel like there's not only like, is there a low percentage of the market, but I don't even think Mac users would be interested in playing this game, kind of thing. But with Linux, it's a low percentage of the market, but I feel like they would be interested in this game. So So I would like to get it on there. For me, Xbox and PlayStation are just I believe that they're a large market and they are very interested in this type of game. So it makes a lot of sense to get it on there.
All right. And now we'll see if my colleagues here have any questions of their own to ask.
Well, I'm trying to figure out where the red flag ended up.
I think I actually dropped.
Probably into the water.
Yeah.
You can't find it.
Yeah.
You dropped it a while back.
I've been trying to pick it up.
Yep. You might have to sink down and then run right over it to return it.
I don't think it's on the bottom.
So you can see it on your HUD. You should see a flag icon somewhere.
Yeah, I know. I can see it, and I
Yeah,
can't
see it.
get to it, like, even when I'm
might
right
be
next
buried
to it.
under something.
Yeah. It probably clipped through something when I dropped it.
It's been returned.
Okay.
Ah, so you got it.
So, to some extent, my opinion of this game is much higher than I was expecting it to be, so that's good. Because I'm not normally one for FPSs, but at least in this Capture the Flag mode, I think I'd still be getting my ass kicked in Last Man Standing. But pretty much all of the Capture the Flag exploits that I try in real life work here, plus drilling through the ground. So, although I guess that kind of falls under trying to find an unexpected route.
Yeah, we're adding some cool stuff to Capture the Flag at the moment. So we're adding the defense turrets, so you'll be able to pick those up at your base and then scatter them around the island or scatter them around your base, and they will automatically look for and detect other enemy players and shoot them or shoot at them. And then those will be, we're also adding in what's called a generator, and that will sit kind of like off your base, and that will control the turrets. So if the enemy destroys your generator, like all of your turrets go down, basically. You can repair that generator.
2 versus 1 is very unfair for Capture the Flag because you can have one person playing defense.
Yeah, I'm all by myself.
So yeah, Capture the Flag has been interesting. It's we didn't, we felt Last Man Standing was missing some key pieces. One, being team play, 2 being respawn, and 3 being like a fun objective kind of. And we're also basing, the reason we're putting in the turrets, we're also putting in proximity mines that will like float on the water, and you can put them on the ground and lay them around your base.
That would be good.
A lot of
because exploit number 1, go around the entire battlefield, whereas that's technically kind of out of bounds, works fine.
Yeah.
I've gotten the flag at least once without actually setting.
So we're basing a lot of the Capture the Flag stuff. We're basing it off of a game called Tribes.
Oh God,
I'm sorry. Hello, I'm here.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's kind of like a cult hit game in a way. It's
there we are.
an older game, and they had a really robust Capture the Flag mode with the generator, the turrets, the mines, the regular, like the skiing and the jetpacking. And it's funny, like a lot of that game was extremely popular, but kind of in an underground way. And it's funny because it came out about 20 years ago, roughly, probably at this point. It was built by a company called Dynamics. I don't know if you guys remember them, but they were an older, game developer back in like the 90s. And I remember they made like Aces Over the Pacific. But anyways, people have been trying for like the last 15 years to launch like a spiritual successor to Tribes. And unfortunately, some of them have done okay. And then, they kind of failed along the way, like Tribes Ascend, for example. There's another game called like Midair that's out right now that is trying to like do the same thing. But people are just like continually trying to like create this spiritual successor to Tribes, and really nobody's been able to do it. So we're hoping that we can do that if possible, give that old Tribes community something to play. It's funny because we haven't introduced it to them yet in any way. So we're really trying to get Capture the Flag, because when that Tribes community comes in, they're gonna have a lot like very high expectations, and so we want to try to at least get as close to those as possible, because they are a very demanding group of people, and that's a good thing, I think. And that's what we're trying to do with Capture the Flag, is just really add these cool elements that were from Tribes, really, like these turrets, mines, generator. Like, for example, if you destroy the generator, the other team's generator, all their turrets go down, and their HUD, like their radar, goes down as well, so they can't see the other team
So
anymore.
fixing it's a really high priority.
Yeah, so keeping it alive, repairing it, fixing it, defending it is a high priority, and it adds this whole other like meta game into the game, where it's not just about capturing flags. It's about setting up your turret strategically. It's about strategically placing the mines. It's about defending this generator, destroying. So there's a lot more choice. There's a lot more emergence in the game. And like, it's funny if you go, read or watch stuff. It's funny. I never played Tribes, but it's been one of my greatest research topics, this last year. I've been just watching gameplay videos, reading like walkthrough tutorials, like reading design documents, and like trying to understand like what it was about that game that made it so like appealing. And it's this stuff. It's the generator, it's the turrets, it's the mines, it's the stuff I'm putting in now that's like not even in there yet. It's the jetpacking and the skiing. It's the speed. So some of that's there. Like, we do have the jetpacking, we do have the skiing. And like some of the stuff we're not gonna be able to get exactly like Tribes. Like our terrain is like highly volatile, whereas theirs was this like old school smooth hilly terrain where you could like use it to like slide off of. You can't really slide so much on our terrain.
Well, smooth hilly terrain doesn't work as well with the terrain deformation systems.
Exactly. I mean, our terrain has some advantages as well. Like it's a lot prettier. It's more interesting. It's more tactical. It's just and you don't slide on it, but you can kind of like ride on the edges of the voxels, which is kind of cool to keep yourself going. Tribes did not have an ocean plane. We do, so they didn't have like this like underwater mechanic, which we have. They didn't have terrain modification in Tribes, right? Where you could dig and add and blow up the terrain with your weapons and kind of mold and modify it. So there are some advantages we have, and we try to get as much of that feeling of speed and skiing and jetpacking as from Tribes as possible.
Yeah, that does work pretty well. I have a question that is not something that you've particularly advertised or anything, but I've noticed you have a rather aggressive day-night cycle here.
Correct. It's about 15 minutes cycle to cycle, or 24 hours is like 15 minutes basically. We did that probably because we did want it to be aggressive, in that we wanted people to notice it, but that was balanced more for like the time limited 15-minute time limited last man standing mode. So it carried over to Capture the Flag, and I'm not sure if it's like really balanced for that, to be honest.
It's been a little bit weird because it changes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Petty, did you get disconnected or something?
I had to leave because whenever it tries to reload, it makes my computer freeze up.
That happens.
Yeah, it's also because I'm streaming more than likely.
Yeah, 1v1 is surprisingly
Are we clear to
fun.
close the game now? We just had a end of game, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is probably a good place to wrap up.
Okay.
So,
okay, well, I actually kind of enjoyed that, so that's good.
Yeah, same here.
And kudos, I guess, for the very esoteric thing of having controls be reconfigurable in the middle of a match, because, like, halfway through the first match, I figured out what I wanted to use to do things, and then I changed it to that without, like, messing everything up, so that was nice.
Yep. Thanks to all the feedback we got. I mean, all that's from community feedback. So.
All right, then. So, Kevin, thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us this week. hopefully the rest of the development Power goes smoothly. Anyway, the game is Power. It's currently available on Steam for $14.99. I suppose one final question: is that the permanent price, or is that going to go up as development continues?
Nope, that'll be the permanent. It'll never be more expensive than that. It will go down in price, when we do deals and sales and that kind of stuff. But no, I definitely do not plan it to be more expensive than that. I think that's a good price point for it, no matter how much content we put into it.
Okay, then. All right, Petty, play us to the next segment when you can. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion for this week.
Petty's connection might be a little bit choppy.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you shouldn't. You don't need to stream a game anymore. So,
Yep.
especially something as intensive as Power. Anyway, this week we are talking about Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Mainly because yesterday the Resident Evil 3 remake got announced. I mean, it got announced. We knew about it for some time beforehand because it got leaked, with pictures and everything. So,
Yeah, yesterday was an official announcement.
yeah, it's like a lot of stuff leaked out of that state of play, if I'm being honest. But, Resident Evil 3 was the main event. Resident Evil 3, the original game. So, widely considered to be the black sheep of the mainline Resident Evil games, or at least the old ones, until say Resident Evil 5 and 6 showed up. But Resident Evil 3 is not so much divisive, it's just not as well loved as, say, Resident Evil 2 or even Code Veronica. Personally, I think it's better than it's given some credit for. Like, the worst mainline Resident Evil I played was Resident Evil 0, but that's more to the fact, when Resident Evil 0 came out, it was 2003, and by that time the Resident Evil formula was really feeling stale and dated, and 0, its grand contribution to Resident Evil was, oh look, you can leave items on the ground. Yay. Contrast to Resident Evil 3, which did offer up some legit gameplay innovations. Chief among them, this is the game that introduced the quick turn, the 180-degree spin, which was really helpful in the days of the pre-rendered and fixed angles. And the other big one was the dodge mechanic. It was easier to dodge enemy attacks in this game. So Resident Evil 3 brought, in terms of the franchise proper, its biggest contribution is actually the Mercenaries mode. May not be well known, especially since the Mercenaries mode had to actually be unlocked via gameplay, at least in the PlayStation 1 version. If you bought the Dreamcast or the GameCube version, that was unlocked from the start, along with Jill's additional outfits. But the real it's really what kind of the zombie mode of Resident Evil. I know that's a strange statement, but Call of Duty zombie mode is probably its most popular, one of its most popular sub modes. Ditto Mercenaries mode. And it all got started here. Obviously, it would be expanded upon in later iterations, but this is its humble beginnings. And also Resident Evil 3 had a crafting system. I know we're all sick to death of fucking crafting in 2019, but 20 years ago, virtually unheard of. It's like I guess you could argue that Resident Evil kind of had a bit of that beforehand with the mixing of items, in particular herbs.
Mhm.
But Resident Evil 3, it was about ammunition. You could combine ingredients to make your own ammo, and it's like not exactly mind blowing stuff for 1999 because it was honestly kind of an afterthought, if I'm being honest. It was a neat thing you could do, not a main requirement like so many fucking games today. Ugh. I don't know. It's like I'm kind of sick of crafting as a mechanic. But so yeah,
certainly put in a lot of things that don't technically need it.
Yeah.
Or that it doesn't add to.
Yeah. Point of order is Resident Evil 3 brought a lot of innovation to the table, far more than it's given credit for, quite honestly. As to why Resident Evil 3 isn't as beloved as a lot of the other mainline titles, well, first of all, it's seen as a step down in terms of like content from Resident Evil 2. It's back down to one main campaign. Mind you, the original Resident Evil had 2 campaigns. Resident Evil 2 had 2 campaigns. Resident Evil 3 is the first numbered title, at least. I think by 1999, some of the spin-off games had been seen, but Resident Evil 3 is the first one to focus on a single protagonist. And its story is considered to be considerably weaker than a lot of the other Resident Evil games. Although, it's a Resident Evil game, so how good is the story in the first place, I ask?
Not exactly the most complex.
The Umbrella Corporation done fucked something up. Go fix.
Well, here's the thing. Like, Resident Evil 3 is a curious piece in terms of the actual timeline, because Resident Evil 3 takes place before and after Resident Evil 2.
Yep.
It's actually a companion game to Resident Evil 2. And a lot of that comes from the background. Like, this game, another reason why it's not all that beloved by the Resident Evil community is because its life was born as a spin-off game. Like, trying to think, what was it? Resident Evil, not Survivor, but I forget the subtitle, but it was supposed to involve a completely different protagonist. It also didn't have involvement of a lot of people who worked on Resident Evil previously, like Shinji Mikami. I believe he was busy with Code Veronica. I believe a lot of the Resident Evil veterans were busy with Code Veronica at this point, which is kind of seen as the real Resident Evil 3. Like, but the reason why it's called Resident Evil 3 is because Capcom wanted to keep mainline Resident Evil series numbered on the original PlayStation. So, it got the 3. It's also the actual writer of the scenario was a new guy instead of, at that time, the scenarios for Resident Evil and other Capcom games were done by a subsidiary called Flagship. You might know Flagship from their work on the Zelda franchise. They were the ones who created the Oracle games and Minish Cap. I know
Which
it's a
were
bit
actually pretty good. So
yeah, but those were like actual development duties. Flagship were, they were like the writer on the Resident Evil games. Until their dissolution, they did have input and proofreading to make sure everything lined up on Resident Evil 3. So, Resident Evil 3 doesn't feel that out of sorts. Other critiques is Resident Evil 3's campaign is actually fairly short. That's because it's designed around replayability. Because Resident Evil 3 is the first Resident Evil game where it will give you multiple options at various points of the story. And how things play out depend on your choices. once again, Resident Evil 3 being ahead of the curve in terms of future gameplay mechanics, surprisingly. But, I suppose we're just kind of dancing around the main course of Resident Evil 3, and, it's in the subtitle, the Nemesis. The Nemesis character is basically their version of Pyramid Head, and it's really weird to say that because the Nemesis came first. Like, the Nemesis came a good 2 years before Silent Hill 2 was a thing.
But yeah, the enemy character that follows
yeah.
you and really has a thing to hunt you particularly, and is allowed to go through doors and use weapons and stuff, and also is pretty much impossible to kill.
The Nemesis, kind of the final form of Mr. X. I think a lot more people are now acquainted with Mr. X thanks to the remake. But,
because is he in the main campaign in the remake?
He's in the first campaign.
I know. Oh, yeah, right. But in that's what I meant. And in the original one,
the remake,
played through twice.
Yeah, he's only through the second playthrough.
In the original, he's in the original, he's in the second playthrough, but in the remake, he's in both runs.
And the Nemesis is considered to be one of the most intimidating and downright actually fucking terrifying enemies in all of survival horror. Maybe all of horror video gaming. Because, I'd say he's the inspiration from not just like Pyramid Head, but like Alien Isolation's Alien. Just that remorseless, invincible, singular-minded killing machine.
Yep.
And yeah, he is he's the main source of tension in Resident Evil 3.
Yeah.
And yeah, I found him I found him nerve-wracking back in the day.
On your toes.
Yeah, especially because once again, he would pop up in inopportune moments, and unlike other enemies, he could follow you.
Yep.
Keep in mind, when we are talking about the PlayStation era.
Yeah, nothing like it was quite seen before.
Now, in terms of the remake, we didn't actually see a whole lot of actual gameplay in the trailer.
Just a bare minimum.
For the record, that first-person stuff, that's actually not the actual gameplay. It's going to be third-person like most Resident Evil games are.
Yeah.
And, it does look like it's going to have some of the iconic moments, like, once again, Resident Evil doing things before Silent Hill. It has the infamous zombie Jill scene. With Silent Hill 3, one of the most famous scenes is its mirror scene. This might have been where they got the idea from. Because at a certain point of the game, Jill gets bitten. And she's infected by, I want to say, the T virus.
It's the T virus. It's Nemesis who bites her, and he's born from the T virus.
Well, it's like, keep in mind, there are different viruses. I think Resident Evil 3 introduced the P virus, if I remember correctly.
I don't recall.
Like I said, even like Resident Evil 2 had the G virus. So, Anyway, point is, she's infected with an umbrella virus. She looked into the mirror and she sees herself zombified. Saw that in the trailer. Also, this is where you get to engaged in playing Carlos, the sidekick of this particular game, going for more of a Resident Evil 1 style affair. He's there to assist. He's briefly playable, and whatnot. As far as how the game looks, I like updated Jill. Like, it's like another thing to mention in terms of the original game. Resident Evil 3 gave Jill Valentine one of her most iconic look. I don't think it's the most iconic look. I think that's still her STARS outfit from the first game. I'm like, it's also the fucking tube top was kind of fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
In the context of the game, like, she's wearing a much more practical outfit. It's like, they probably should have kept the sweater.
Perhaps, yeah.
I mean, I'd imagine it would, it's like fall. I think it's like fall time, where it's a time where you would need a sweater. But
Yeah.
whatever. Her face is redesigned. I think that's mainly due to like some rights issues around the original modeling of Jill Valentine. Like, I mean, she hasn't looked like the original Jill Valentine since at least Resident Evil Revelations.
Yeah.
Maybe like
much larger by then.
Yeah. But she looks fine. Carlos looks okay too. Like, it's like, I don't know. I never had a strong opinion about Carlos, except that he kind of needed to punch the face for, certain things. Like the way, but whatever. And the remake of Resident Evil 3 is coming next year. What was it? Was it February or was it April?
April of next year. April.
Yeah, there
3rd,
we go.
I think.
Yeah, something like that. Which is kind of surprisingly close to because, like, I don't think people were expecting that we were going to get the Resident Evil 3 remake like about a year from the Resident Evil 2 remake.
Yeah, I was expecting it to be more like maybe November or something like that.
So as it turns out, these two remakes were done in tandem. It's just Resident Evil 3 has been in development at a new Capcom-backed studio. And also, Resident Evil 3 is going to be bundled with Resident Evil, Survive?
Resistance,
there we go. That's the new online Resident Evil game that's coming. And it will be a free download with the Resident Evil 3.
Comes right with it.
Yeah. So quite the package there. Like, now, it's like, I'm optimistic on Resident Evil 3, given how Resident Evil 2 turned out. Like, but I also do want to see more of the actual game.
Yeah, same here.
So cautiously optimistic right now. And that's about all I have currently on Resident Evil 3. Like I said, we just learned about the remake, about a week ago? So,
they have not published a lot of news about it.
Yes. Anyway, we might revisit Resident Evil 3, the remake, as more stuff gets learned. We'll see. Anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Getting down to the wire in terms of shows, as no Friday show this week. And on Sunday we will be having our last reviews of the year, not of the season, because this season will go on long after the holidays. But anyway, on Sunday we will be reviewing The Pit Infinity. I have many things to say about this game, none of them good. We have Monster Jam Steel Titans for the Nintendo Switch, Gollix has been handling that one.
Yep.
Said, well, I mean, you're the Switch reviewer until someone else gets a Switch.
No, I know. It's just I'm not super enthusiastic about monster trucks.
I get that. It's just, this wasn't the game I wanted.
It's
But
fine. No, I'm not complaining.
Okay.
You're getting a generally neutral to curious perspective because.
Yeah, fair enough.
Never.
And
yeah.
Yeah, and our last game of the before we go on break will be Beautiful Bricks. It's an Arkanoid clone or a Breakout clone or however it's a block breaker game. Anyway, more on all of those on Sunday. And until then, I shall wish you good gaming.